No one in the kingdom had ever seen a royal wolf kneel. Yet in that moment, beneath a sky heavy with stormlight, a wounded wolf cub, its fur glowing with ancient power, pressed its head against the chest of the one girl the Alpha King had just rejected before his entire court. And when the cub cried out, every warrior in the clearing dropped to one knee. Not for their king, but for her. They called her nothing, not even by her name. In the Iron Fang Kingdom, where strength was worshipped and weakness erased, a wolfless girl had no place, no voice, no future, no right to stand among those born with fangs and fury in their blood. She had been found years ago at the edge of the forest, half-starved, wrapped in torn cloth, with no mark, no scent, no trace of lineage. No one knew where she came from. No one cared. So they gave her a purpose. Servant, cleaner, invisible. She learned quickly that silence was safer than defiance. That lowering her gaze meant survival. That every whisper, every laugh behind her back, every cruel shove in the corridors of the stone palace was simply the way the world worked. Because she was wolfless. And in a kingdom of wolves, that meant she was less than prey. Still, she endured. There was something inside her that refused to break. A quiet strength, a strange awareness that stirred whenever she stepped near the forest, as though something unseen watched her from beyond the trees. She could not explain it. She only knew that when the wind carried the scent of pine and earth, her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to belonging. But belonging was a lie she could not afford. Not here. Not in Iron Fang. Especially not on the day everything changed. The day the Alpha King chose his mate. The great hall had never been so full. Nobles draped in silver and black gathered beneath towering stone arches, their voices echoing with excitement, calculation, and barely concealed hunger for power. At the center of it all stood the throne carved from ancient bone, polished by generations of rulers who had claimed their dominance through blood and conquest. And before it stood her. She had not been meant to be there. One moment she had been carrying trays of wine through the lower halls, keeping her head down as always. The next, a noblewoman, Lady Seraphine, known for her cruelty masked as elegance, had seized her by the wrist and dragged her into the chamber. "Let them see," Seraphine had whispered with a smile too sharp to be kind. "Let them see what the king refuses to notice." The crowd parted as she was shoved forward. Eyes turned. Whispers spread. Laughter followed. A wolfless servant girl, standing in the mating ceremony of the Alpha King. It was an insult, a spectacle, exactly what Seraphine intended. And then, he entered. The Alpha King of Iron Fang did not need to announce himself. His presence alone commanded silence. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in dark furs that seemed to drink in the light, he moved like something born of war and shadow. His gaze swept across the hall, cold, precise, unyielding. When his eyes landed on her, something flickered. Too fast to name. Gone, just as quickly. The silence deepened. "You," he said. The single word struck harder than any blow. Her breath caught, not in hope, not in fear, in certainty, because she already knew what would come next. Step forward. Her feet moved before her mind could resist. Each step echoed against the stone, louder than her heartbeat, louder than the whispers rising once more around her. She felt every gaze, every judgment, every expectation pressing down on her. She stopped before him, did not look up, did not speak. The king studied her for a long moment. Then, before the entire court, he spoke the words that sealed her place in their world. "She is nothing." The hall erupted. Laughter, mockery, satisfaction. The final blow delivered with the calm certainty of a ruler who never needed to raise his voice. "She carries no wolf," he continued, his tone devoid of emotion. "No scent, no power, no lineage worth naming." A pause. Then cola still. "She is not my mate." The words shattered something in the air, not because they were unexpected, but because of what came with them, Rejection. Public. Absolute. Irrevocably. She felt it then not as pain, but as a hollow space opening inside her chest. A quiet emptiness where something fragile had once lived, something she had never dared to fully acknowledge. Hope. Foolish, silent hope. Gone. The crowd watched her, waiting. For tears. For pleading. For weakness. She gave them none. Instead, she lowered her head and stepped back. And in that moment, she made a choice. She would leave. Not the palace. Not yet. But the illusion. The belief that she could ever belong here. That night, beneath the cover of silence, she crossed the outer gates. No guard stopped her. No one noticed. Why would they? She had always been invisible, but the forest did. The moment her feet touched the earth beyond the stone walls, the air shifted. The wind stilled. The shadows deepened. And somewhere, far within the ancient woods, something awakened. The forest was not kind. It was not meant to be. It was a place of old things older than the kingdom, older than the wolves who claimed dominion over the land. The deeper she walked, the more the silence pressed in around her, thick and watchful, as though the trees themselves whispered warnings she could not yet understand. She should have turned back. Any rational soul would have. But she did not, because for the first time in her life, she was not afraid. Not of the dark, not of what might be watching her, not even of death. There was something else guiding her now, something she could feel beneath her skin. A pull, soft, persistent, calling her deeper. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. Time moved strangely beneath the canopy of ancient branches. The moon had long since risen when she heard it. A sound, faint, broken, a whimper. She froze. Every instinct told her to stay still, to listen, to survive. But her body betrayed her, because that sound, huat, not in her ears, in her chest. She moved toward it, slowly, carefully, until she saw it. The wolf cub lay half hidden beneath a fallen branch, its silver fur matted with blood, its breathing shallow, uneven. But that was not what made her breath catch. It was the light, faint at first, then stronger, a soft glow pulsing beneath its skin, like embers beneath ash. Impossible. No ordinary wolf carried such power. No ordinary creature could survive wounds like that. And yet, it was alive. Barely. She dropped to her knees beside it without thinking. "Hey." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." The cub flinched. Its eyes snapped open. And for a single, impossible moment, they met hers. The world stilled. The forest fell silent. And something ancient recognized her. The cub did not snarl, did not recoil. Instead, it reached for her, weakly, desperately, as though she was the only thing anchoring it to life. Her hands moved on instinct, pressing against its wound, trying to stop the bleeding, though she had no idea what she was doing. The glow beneath its fur intensified, flickering wildly, unstable. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling now. "Please, just stay." And then, something changed. The air thickened. The ground beneath her trembled. And from the darkness between the trees came the sound of footsteps. Not one. Many. Heavy. Fast. Surrounding. She turned. Too late. Figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked in armor and moonlight, their eyes glowing with the unmistakable mark of wolf warriors. Blades drawn. Senses locked. Hunting. Here. And behind them, he stepped forward. The Alpha King. His presence struck the clearing like thunder. His gaze fell not on her, but on the cub in her arms. And for the first time, emotion broke through the cold mask of a ruler. Shock. Fury. Something deeper. Something dangerous. "You," he said again. But this time, it was not dismissal. It was something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. Because now, he was looking at her like she mattered. The warriors moved first. not with the wild rush of common soldiers, but with the discipline of men trained to kill without wasting breath. Steel lifted in the moonlight. Boots crushed the wet leaves beneath them. Their eyes burned gold, fixed on the glowing cub in her arms, as though she had stolen something sacred, something worth spilling blood to reclaim. "Put it down," one of them growled. She tightened her hold. The cub trembled against her chest, its small claws catching in the worn fabric of her dress. Its light flickered brighter, then dimmer, like a candle fighting against the wind. Blood warmed her palms. She could feel its heartbeat too fast, too weak. "I found him like this," she said. No one believed her. Why would they? A wolfless servant girl, rejected before the entire court only hours earlier, now discovered deep in the forbidden forest with a wounded glowing wolf cub in her arms. Even she understood how impossible it looked. The Alpha King stepped closer. The warriors parted for him instantly. His gaze did not leave the cub. "Give him to me." His voice was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that made every warrior lower his head. She should have obeyed. She had obeyed men like him all her life. Men with power, men with names. Men who could decide whether someone like her was allowed to breathe one more day. But the cub pressed its head harder against her, and a thin sound escaped its throat. Not a whimper this time. A plea. And somehow, she understood it. Not in words. Not exactly. But in feeling. "Don't let them take me." Her breath caught. The Alpha King saw it. His eyes narrowed. "What did you hear?" She froze. The clearing seemed to shrink around her. I didn't hear anything." Liar. The word should have struck like an insult. But this time, there was no mockery in it. Only suspicion. Only fear hidden beneath authority. He took another step, and the cub suddenly bared its tiny teeth. A soft growl rose from its chest, weak but unmistakable. The warriors stiffened. Some stepped back. Others exchanged glances filled with something she did not understand. The Alpha King stopped. For the first time, he did not command. He simply stared. At the cub. Then at her. "What are you?" he asked. The question was colder than the night. She should have said nothing. She should have lowered her head, begged forgiveness, surrendered the cub, and hoped the king's mercy was not as dead as everyone claimed. But something in her had changed since the rejection. Something small. Something dangerous. "I am the nothing you left in your hall," she whispered. The words moved through the clearing like a blade. Several warriors looked away. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. For one breath, the forest itself seemed to wait for his anger. But it did not come. Instead, his gaze dropped to the blood spreading beneath the cub's fur. "He will die if you keep holding him like that." Her defiance cracked. "Then save him." The words slipped out before she could stop them. A demon. From her to him. The warriors reacted instantly. Snarls, sharp movements, hands tightening on weapons. No servant spoke to the Alpha King that way. No rejected girl. No wolfless thing pulled from the dirt and raised among kitchens and cold corridors. But the king lifted one hand. Silence fell. His eyes stayed on her. "You dare command me?" She looked down at the cub, then back at him. "No. I'm asking you not to let a child die, because you hate me." Something changed in his face then. Not softness. Not kindness. Recognition, perhaps. Or pain. The kind buried so deep that even he seemed surprised it still existed. He moved closer again, slower this time. When he reached for the cub, the glow beneath its fur flared violently, a burst of silver light so bright that every warrior staggered back. But she did not move. The light did not burn her. It wrapped around her fingers like mist. The Alpha King stared at her hand, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw uncertainty in his eyes. "The cub chose you," one of the older warriors whispered. Another hissed. "Impossible." The king turned his head slightly. The whispering stopped. But the damage was done. She had heard it. "The cub chose you." The words settled into her bones with terrifying weight. "What does that mean?" she asked. No one answered. Not the warriors. Not the king. Only the cub answered, pressing its face against her chest again, its breath shallow and trembling. The Alpha King removed a dagger from his belt. She stiffened. He saw the fear and paused. Then, slowly, he cut across his palm. Dark blood welled instantly. Royal blood. Alpha blood. The scent of it changed the air. Every warrior bowed their head without thinking. Even the trees seemed to lean closer. "Hold him still," the king said. She obeyed, though her hands shook. He pressed his bleeding palm against the cub's wound. The cub cried out. She nearly pulled it away. "Don't," he warned. The glow surged. Silver light tangled with the red of his blood. For a moment, the clearing filled with a sound like distant howling, not from the warriors, not from the forest, but from somewhere far beneath the earth. Ancien. Mourning. Alive. The wound began to close. Slowly. The cub's breathing steadied. Relief struck her so suddenly she almost collapsed. But then the cub opened its eyes again and looked not at the king. At her. The Alpha King saw. Everyone saw. His expression hardened. But the emotion beneath it was no longer fury. It was fear. Not fear of the cub. Fear of what her connection to it meant. "Take her," he ordered. The warriors moved. This time, she did not fight. Because the cub was alive. Because her strength had vanished with the danger. Because when one soldier reached for the wolf cub, it snarled again until the king said, "Leave it with her." The entire clearing froze. One warrior looked up sharply. "My king, leave it." No one questioned him twice. And so she was escorted back through the forest with the glowing cub in her arms, surrounded by royal warriors who looked at her as though she had become something more dangerous than a prisoner. Behind them, the Alpha King walked in silence, but she could feel his gaze on her back the entire way. Not as a ruler looking at a servant, not as a man looking at someone he had rejected, but as a wolf watching a door he had locked long ago slowly begin to open. By dawn, the entire palace knew. The rejected wolfless girl had returned from the forbidden forest carrying a royal wolf cub. Not just any cub. A glowing one. A sacred one. One the Alpha King himself had ordered no one to touch. The whispers spread faster than fire through dry grass. Servants stopped working when she passed. Guards stared too long. Noblewomen hid behind jeweled fans and spoke her name as though it tasted bitter. Yesterday, she had been nothing. Today, she was a question no one dared ask loudly. Why did the cub stay with her? Why had the king brought her back alive? And why had he placed her not in the servant quarters, but in the old healing chamber beneath the eastern tower? The chamber smelled of herbs, smoke, and rain-soaked stone. It had one narrow window, one locked door, and one bed far too soft for someone who had spent most of her life sleeping near kitchen fires. The cub lay beside her beneath a blanket, still weak, but alive. Its glow had dimmed to a faint silver pulse, steady now, calm whenever her hand rested on its fur. When she tried to move away, it whimpered. When anyone else approached, it growled. Even the royal healers could not touch it, unless she kept one hand on its head. By midday, the Alpha King came. Alone. No guards. No court. No Seraphine smiling in the shadows. Just him. He entered without knocking, because kings did not knock, and the room immediately felt smaller. He wore no crown, only dark leather and a cloak clasped with silver. Without the court surrounding him, without the throne at his back, he looked less like a symbol and more like a man carved from exhaustion and restraint. She stood too quickly. The cub growled. The king stopped near the door. "Sit," he said. It was not gentle, but it was not cruel. She sat. His eyes moved to the cub. "How is he?" The question surprised her, not because he asked, but because of the way he asked it. Low, tight, almost afraid of the answer. "He's better," she said. "He still won't eat unless I hold the bowl." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth, too brief to become a smile. He was always stubborn. She looked at him. "You know him." The king's expression closed. For a long moment, He said nothing. Then he walked to the window and looked out toward the black forest beyond the walls. He belonged to the royal nursery. Belonged. The word chilled her. What happened? His fingers tightened behind his back. There was an attack 3 nights ago. No alarm sounded. No gate was broken. No blood trail was found. Only an empty cradle and 3 dead guards. Her throat tightened. The cub pressed closer to her side. He was taken? Yes. By who? The king turned back. If I knew, they would already be dead. The coldness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, she believed him. The king's gaze sharpened. When you found him, did you see anyone? No. Did you hear anything? She hesitated. Too long. His eyes caught it. What did you hear? She looked down at the cub. The truth waited on her tongue like a forbidden spell. I heard him. The room went still. The king did not move. Explain. I don't know how. Her voice lowered. It wasn't speech. It was like feeling words inside my chest. Fear, pain, asking me not to let go. The king stared at her as though every answer had opened a deeper wound. No wolfless human can hear a royal wolf spirit. I know. No servant can survive contact with sacred blood. I know. No one, outside the royal line, can calm a cub born under the moonmark. Her pulse slowed. The cub's glow brightened faintly. She swallowed. Then, maybe your rules are wrong. The words were reckless, but the king did not punish them. Instead, he looked at her for so long that heat crept up her neck. Not shame. Something worse. Awareness. Because beneath the suspicion in his gaze, there was something else now. A pull neither of them wanted to name. She felt it in the silence between them, in the way the cub's glow strengthened whenever they stood too close, in the way the air changed around him, making the room feel like the edge of a storm. Then the cub lifted its head. Its small ears twitched. A sound escaped it. Soft, clear, almost like a word. The king went rigid. She felt it too. Not with her ears. With her bones. Blood. Remembers. The king's face changed. What did it say? She looked up slowly. You heard it too? His eyes darkened. No. Ali. She knew it instantly. And somehow, he knew that she knew. For the first time, their silence was not made of fear. It was made of shared danger. Before either could speak again, the door opened. Lady Seraphine entered as though she owned every stone beneath her feet. She was beautiful, in the way blades were beautiful, polished, sharp, made for harm. Her silver gown shimmered like frost, and her smile was soft enough to fool anyone who had never been cut by it. My king, she said, bowing slightly. The council has gathered. They demand answers. The king's jaw tightened. I did not summon you. No, Seraphine said, her gaze sliding to the girl, then the cub. But the kingdom is restless. A servant girl holding a royal beast in a locked tower does invite concern. The cub growled. Seraphine's eyes flashed. Fear, quickly hidden, but not quick enough. The girl saw it. So did the king. Seraphine smiled wider. How strange, she murmured. Even beasts learn poor taste when wounded. The girl lowered her gaze. Old habit, old survival. But the cub suddenly rose on trembling legs and stepped in front of her, protecting her. Seraphine's smile faltered. The Alpha King watched in silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The girl who had been nothing yesterday was no longer standing alone. A royal cub had chosen her. The Alpha King was questioning her, and the woman who had dragged her into humiliation now looked at her with fear. That was when she understood. The rejection had not ended her story. It had opened the cage, and whatever she truly was, the whole kingdom was beginning to hear it breathe. By nightfall, the tower no longer felt like a place of healing. It felt like a cage. The air had changed. The whispers beyond the stone walls were no longer distant. They pressed closer, sharper, carrying fragments of fear disguised as reason. The council had gathered. The nobles had spoken, and in the spaces between their words, a decision had begun to form. She felt it before she saw it. The cub stirred beside her, its faint glow flickering as though disturbed by something unseen. Its ears flattened. A low sound vibrated in its chest, not fear, but warning. "Something's wrong," she murmured. The door did not open. It shattered. Wood splintered inward as armored figures stormed the chamber, their eyes burning gold, their movements precise and merciless. Not palace guards, not protectors, hunters. She rose instinctively, pulling the cub into her arms. "What are you doing?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. No one answered. A figure stepped through the broken doorway. Lady Seraphine. Her beauty had not changed, but the softness was gone. What remained was something colder, sharper, no longer pretending to hide. "The council has reached a decision," she said. Her voice carried no hesitation. "No trial?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Seraphine smiled. "You mistake your place." The cub growled. Seraphine's gaze flicked to it, then back to the girl. "That creature does not belong to you. He shows me." The words came without thought. Seraphine's expression hardened. "Creatures do not choose servants." The soldiers advanced. Steel flashed. "Seize her." They moved. Fast. Trained. Unstoppable. But the moment their hands reached for her, the cub screamed. Not a cry. A comment. The sound tore through the chamber, raw and ancient, vibrating through bone and blood. The glow beneath its fur exploded outward, flooding the room in silver light. The soldiers staggered, their grips faltering as something invisible pushed against them. And then, she heard it. Not just the cub, not just one voice. Many, layered, echoing, ancien. "Wake." Her breath caught. The world tilted. The walls seemed to dissolve. The chamber replaced by something older, darker, deeper than stone. Shadows moved where there were no shadows. The scent of earth, of rain, of something buried long before the kingdom had ever risen filled her lungs. "What is happening?" one soldier gasped. Seraphine stepped back. For the first time, fear showed. "Kill her," she snapped. The command shattered the moment. The soldiers lunged again, and something inside her broke. Not fear, not pain, control. The light surged, not from the cub, from her. It burst outward in a wave that threw the nearest soldier back against the stone wall with bone-cracking force. Another dropped his weapon, clutching his head as though something inside him screamed. She did not understand it. She could not stop it. The cub's glow pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The voices grew louder. "Remember." The chamber shook. The soldiers faltered. And in that chaos, a new presence filled the doorway. The Alpha King. He did not hesitate. He stepped into the storm of light and power as though it could not touch him. His gaze locked onto her, onto the cub, onto the destruction unfolding in the room. "What have you done?" Seraphine demanded. The king did not answer her. His voice cut through the chaos, low and commanding. "Look at me." She couldn't. The power surged again. "Look at me," he repeated, stronger this time. Her eyes lifted, and the moment they met his, everything stilled. The light froze. The voices dimmed. The world snapped back into place. Silence, broken only by her ragged breathing. The soldiers lay scattered across the chamber. The cub trembled against her chest, and the Alpha King stood before her, closer than ever before. Not afraid, not angry. "Certain, she did not steal the cub," he said. Seraphine's lips parted. "My king, she was chosen." The words fell like judgment. Final, irrefutable. The room shifted. Power, once again, began to move. But this time, it was not against her. No. Seraphine's voice cut through the silence. Sharp, desperate. "This is manipulation. A trick. She's using forbidden magic." "She is not using it," the king interrupted. His gaze never left the girl. "It is using her." The distinction changed everything. The soldiers shifted uneasily. The healers at the edge of the room stepped back. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. "What are you?" Seraphine demanded. The question echoed the one the king had asked in the forest, but now It carried fear. The girl looked down at her hands. They still glowed faintly, silver light pulsing beneath her skin. Alive. I don't know, she whispered. The cub lifted its head. Its eyes burned brighter now, stronger. And then, it spoke. Not aloud. Not in words anyone else could hear. But she heard it clearly. Blood remembers. Her heart stuttered. The king saw it. What did it say? She looked at him. This time, she did not hesitate. It knows me. A murmur rippled through the room. That's impossible, someone whispered. The king stepped closer. Explain. I can't. Her voice shook. I don't understand it, but it recognizes me. Like I've always been there. Like I belong to something it remembers. The king's expression darkened. Not with doubt, with realization. He turned slowly toward the gathered soldiers, toward the broken chamber, toward the witnesses who would carry this moment into every corner of the kingdom. Clear the room. Seraphine stepped forward. You cannot mean... Now. The command cracked like thunder. No one disobeyed. Not even her. Within moments, the chamber emptied. Doors closed. Silence returned. Only 3 remained. The king, the girl, the cub. The king exhaled slowly. Then, for the first time since she had known him, he lowered himself. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Enough. That the distance between ruler and nothing began to collapse. There is a story, he said quietly. One no one tells. Outside the royal line. The cub's glow deepened. The air thickened again. Ancien. Waiting. The first kings of Ironfang were not born from wolves alone. He continued. They were bound to something older. Something that spoke through the forest, through the earth, through the blood of those chosen to carry it. Her pulse slowed. Each word settled deeper than the last. They called them spirit-bound. The word resonated, like something buried in her memory had been waiting to hear it. Most of that bloodline was lost centuries ago, the king said. Erased, hidden, forgotten. His eyes locked onto hers. Until now, her breath caught. No, she whispered. I'm not. You are. The cub pressed closer to her. The glow flared. And in that moment, she felt it. Not just the cub. Not just the king. Something vast. Endless. Watching her from beyond time itself. And for the first time, she was afraid. Because, whatever she truly was, it was not meant to be small. The truth did not stay contained. It never did. By dawn, the entire kingdom trembled. Rumors twisted into certainty. Certainty into fear. Fear into something far more dangerous belief. The story spread faster than any decree could contain. The rejected girl was not wolfless. She was something older. Something tied to the origin of the throne itself. And the cub was no ordinary heir. When she stepped into the great hall again, it was not as a servant. It was as a question no one could answer. The same hall, the same throne, the same place where she had been declared nothing. But everything had changed. The nobles stood silent. The warriors lined the walls. And when the cub in her arms lifted its head, they felt it. The pull, the weight, the undeniable truth pressing down on their instincts. Onebe one. They knelt. Not commanded. Not forced. Aussteigt. Even those who resisted felt their legs tremble. Even Seraphine. Her eyes burned with fury as she remained standing. But the strain showed. The king entered. The hall bowed. But something had shifted. For the first time, he was not the center. He stopped before her. The memory of his rejection lingered in the air, like a wound that had not yet healed. She is under my protection, he declared. The words echoed. But this time, they were not enough. Because the kingdom had already begun to see her for what she was becoming. Not nothing. Not servant. Not rejected. Something far more dangerous. Something that could not be controlled. And somewhere deep within the shadows of the court, betrayal had not ended. It had only begun. The silence in the great hall did not break. It deepened. He had declared her under his protection, but protection was not the same as acceptance. Not in a kingdom that worshipped strength above all else. Not in a court that had already seen him reject her once before. They were watching him now, not as their king, but as a man being tested. The cub stirred in her arms, its glow strengthening, steady and sure. It did not fear the hall. It did not fear the warriors. It did not fear the throne. It leaned into her, chose her, again, and the entire kingdom felt it. The Alpha King saw it too. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. The distance between them shrank to nothing. She could feel the heat of him now, the weight of his presence, the storm beneath his control. "You should not be standing," one of the elder council members said, his voice thin with barely contained panic. "If what she is true, then the laws are mine to command," the king cut in. The elder fell silent. The king's gaze never left her. "You were wronged," he said. The words struck harder than his rejection had, because this time, they were not for the court. They were for her. The hall held its breath. "No." Alpha King apologized. Not to servants, not to the weak, not to anyone. But this was not an apology. Not yet. He took another step. And then, he did the unthinkable. He lowered himself. Not fully at first. Not like a warrior kneeling before a ruler. But enough that every person in that hall felt it in their bones. A shift. A fracture. Power. Bending. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Seraphine stepped forward. "You cannot." Silence. The word struck like a blade. She froze. The king lowered himself further. One knee touched the stone. The sound echoed louder than any battle cry. Shock spread through the court like wildfire. Because this was not submission. This was recognition. "I rejected you before my court," he said, his voice low, steady, impossible to ignore. "Not because you were nothing, but because I did not understand what you were." Her breath caught. The cub's glow intensified. "And now you do?" she asked. A dangerous question. A necessary one. His gaze did not waver. "No." The honesty in it cut deeper than any lie. "But I know this." His hand rose slowly, stopping just short of her. Not touching. Waiting. Respecting something even he did not yet fully comprehend. "You are not beneath this kingdom." A pause. Then, "The kingdom stands beneath you." The words shattered whatever remained of the old world. This was not protection. This was reversal. The girl who had been dragged into the hall as a mockery now stood at its center, with the Alpha King kneeling before her, and every soul in that room felt the truth of it. The cub lifted its head. Its eyes burned bright, and for the first time, the bond between them pulsed outward. Not hidden, not quiet. Felt. The king's breath slowed. Something ancient moved through him too. A recognition. A connection. Not of dominance. Not of control. Of destiny. "You are tied to him," he said softly. "And you," she whispered, "are tied to me." The words settled between them. Dangerous. Unavoidable. Real. It happened in a single moment. Too fast for thought. Too precise to be chance. The attack came from within the court. A bloodflesh. Not from a warrior. Not from an enemy at the gates. From behind the throne. A council member. Old. Trusted. Forgotten. Until now. His eyes burned with something unnatural as he lunged forward. The dagger in his hand aimed not at the king, but at the cub. "No," she cried. The world slowed. The king moved. Too far. Too late. The blade cut through the air, and then stopped. A burst of silver light exploded between them. Not from the cub. From her. The force slammed into the attacker, throwing him backward across the hall. The dagger shattered against an invisible barrier. The air itself seemed to scream as something ancient tore free. The girl staggered. The cub cried out. And then, it began. The light did not fade. It grew. It surged outward, spiraling around her like a storm made of memory and power. The floor cracked beneath her feet. The banners lining the hall snapped violently as wind erupted from nowhere. The voices returned, not faint, not distant, loud, clear. Her eyes, her body trembled, her vision blurred. She was no longer in the hall. She stood in something older, a forest that did not belong to time. Wolves surrounded her, massive, ethereal. Their eyes burned with silver fire. And at the center, one stepped forward, larger than the rest. Ancien. Its gaze locked onto hers. You are not lost. You were hidden. The truth slammed into her, not as memory, as identity. She was not abandoned. She was not nothing. She was the last of a bloodline the kingdom had buried, the last spirit-bound. Her eyes opened. The hall returned, but everything had changed. The attacker tried to rise. He didn't get the chance. The king reached him first. The sound of bone breaking echoed through the chamber as the Alpha King's hand closed around his throat. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The man laughed. A broken, twisted sound. "You think this ends with one blade?" he rasped. "You think the council will kneel to something they cannot control?" His gaze flicked to her. "They will burn her." The king's grip tightened. "Not while I live." The man smiled. "That is the problem." Then, his body went still. Dead. Silence fell. Heavy. Unavoidable. The king turned, looked at her, and for the first time, he did not see a mystery. He saw a threat to everything the kingdom had been built on, and yet, he stepped toward her anyway. The hall did not erupt. There was no cheer, no celebration, only silence, because everyone understood what had just happened. The world had changed, and it would not change back. The girl stood at the center of it, the last echoes of power fading from her skin. The cub rested against her, no longer weak, no longer trembling. Its glow was steady now, whole, complete. The king stopped before her, close, closer than before. "You saved him," he said. She shook her head. "I didn't choose to." "That does not matter." His voice softened, for the first time since she had known him. "You still did." The weight of everything settled between them. The rejection, the forest, the bond, the truth. "What happens now?" she asked. A simple question, with no simple answer. The king looked at the court, at the nobles who no longer dared meet her gaze, at the warriors who had already knelt, at the throne that suddenly seemed smaller. "Now," he said slowly, "they decide whether they follow me." His eyes returned to hers. "Or you." The air shifted. Dangerous. Electric. Because the answer was already forming. She felt it. The cub felt it. The kingdom felt it. She stepped forward. Just one step. But it changed everything. "I don't want your throne," she said quietly. The court stirred. Confusion. Relief. Suspicion. "But I won't kneel to it either." The king's lips curved slightly. Not a smile. Something deeper. "Good." The word held approval. Respect. Something far more dangerous than either, because it meant he had already chosen. The cub lifted its head. Its glow pulsed once. Strong. Certain. And in that moment, the bond between them locked into place. Not forced. Not claimed. Chosen. The king reached for her again. This time, she did not pull away. His hand closed around hers. Warm. Steady. Real. The hall watched. The kingdom held its breath. And the girl who had once been nothing stood beside the Alpha King. Not beneath him. Not behind him. But equal. And somewhere beyond the walls of Iron Fang, the ancient forest stirred. Because the spirit-bound had returned. And this time, they were no longer alone.